I'll bring that here. Unless you're here to work.
That means that
Gosh, you're gonna.
I have a special request. Item 6.4 is the beginning of all the hearings.
Okay, yeah.
Just come up and make a general statement on our items.
Okay.
Just focus with the other ones that cover.
You want me to resolve?
No, just so that you get the comments before to say, you know,
Is that?
I came into one because the news fell. Oh, so our cable is lodged. So I can't take it.
and now I think you can mean the revenue thing will get better.
One right was he's the example.
So operation off the 21 budget, but it's so the money's going to be there. But if you use this for projects,
Yeah, so it's,
so we don't have to, you know,
Good evening and welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks. This is Monday, January 11th, 2021, and the Committee of the Whole meeting. Welcome and roll call.
Weigel,
Here.
Daschler, Weber,
Here.
Mock,
Here.
Kavami, Sandy, Bean.
Here.
Item 2, discussion items. 2.1, hearing on application for abatement and settlement of taxes for the following properties. Do you need me to read them into the record?
Pardon?
Do you need me to read them into the record?
No, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
we can go through them. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Vice President Mock, members of the committee. Tonight, what we have is 9 multifamily abatement applications from 2 owners for a reduction in their 2018 valuations. We'll just go right down the list here, and the first one on this list is the Verge Campus Crest. It's owned by Campus Crest at Grand Forks LLC. Mr. Tibbles with Frederickson and Byron, I believe, is on Zoom, and he can speak on their behalf.
Okay,
Welcome.
First, let me test. Can folks hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. There it is. Okay, great. Well, like was mentioned, David Tibbles here with the Frederickson and Byron Law Firm in Fargo. Good evening to everyone here. Appearing tonight on behalf of a few taxpayers, and I suppose Tammy, we can maybe talk about how what makes most sense to do kind of procedurally here in terms of the order that we take these. I'm here on behalf of the Verge, Ashland, South Point, Legacy, and Coles abatement applications that are before the committee here tonight. First off, I do want to offer just a thank you to city staff for accommodating us with the Zoom link here, just given the state of the world right now. I guess, while I'm up here as, sort of initially, I would like to make just a couple of basic points to set the stage before discussing any of the properties, the Campus Crest Verge one, first off in particular. First off, just want to mention that North Dakota law is clear that when a taxpayer presents an abatement request, the city and the county boards have an obligation to consider the merits of that request. And then in doing so to themselves determine the true and full value of a property based on the available evidence. The process isn't meant to be an appeal of an assessor's initial valuation. Instead it's really meant to be a fresh look using what information is available to everyone here today on January 11th, 2021, to determine whether a property was assessed in excess of its true and full value as of the assessment date. And here for all of the properties before you tonight, well, at least for the ones that I'm here for, that's February 1st of 2018, so just about 3 years ago now. To the extent that it was assessed in excess of that true and full value, abatement requests must be granted. So that's point number one. Point number two, the Verge and then the other properties that I'm here to discuss, they're all commercial properties. And in that context, true and full value is equivalent to what you would consider market value, which would just be what a buyer is willing to pay in an arm's length transaction on an open market. Now, in order to estimate that market value as of any given date, the state Supreme Court has recognized that the three generally accepted appraisal methods are all valid approaches for making that estimate. And as I'll describe in a bit, the taxpayers' opinions of value here presented tonight, at least again the ones that I'm here speaking on behalf of, they primarily leverage one of those methods, which is the income approach. They do that by using a combination of property-specific and then also some market survey numbers to calculate a property's ability to generate income, which, I think I should probably go without saying that's the primary consideration for folks who are looking to invest in commercial properties. So I guess I make those two sort of general points here just to reiterate to you that you need to decide for yourselves what is that true and full value of each of the properties here tonight. The assessor's office obviously has its opinion, and the taxpayers have theirs as well. And I can tell you, just speaking on behalf of the taxpayers that I represent, and then, frankly, on just from my perspective and that of my colleagues, we've really appreciated the discussions that we've had with the assessor's office in the past, and we generally know where and why we disagree. But to be sure, neither side gets any sort of special deference in this regard under the law, and you might end up deciding that that the true and full value is actually somewhere in between those two opinions. But it's your making that decision that's what this process is all about. So those are just some general points. I'll talk now. I'll get to specifically the Campus Crest Verge property, but I guess just kind of thinking logistically here. I know you've got 10 items on your agenda that I'm speaking to myself. I'll go into the details of each of those properties in time here, just kind of going over background and then methodologies that were used to support the opinions of value in your packets. The first 9 items, again, starting off with the Verge, those are all apartment complexes. And the opinions of value there, they all utilize the income approach, and they actually share a number of assumptions there. So I'll go through the Verge calculation in pretty close detail here now, first off, and then we can pretty quickly go through the others. I would think the 10th item, the Coles property. Its opinion of value actually, it uses the income approach too, but the calculation is slightly different, just given the the different character of that building, and then it also involves a little bit of a cost approach analysis, just as a check. So I'll discuss that one in more detail when we get to it. But with all of that sort of dispensed with, speaking specifically to the Verge apartments, again, this is Campus Crest at Grand Forks LLC. This is a 600-unit apartment complex. It's geared towards kids studying at UND. I will say that this is a large complex, but the units are generally smaller, and they generally generate relatively lower rents than the other properties that I'll be discussing here tonight. We believe that the true and full value of this property is actually just a hair over $17.6 million. And that's the result of, again, an income approach analysis that was prepared by the taxpayer using taxpayer-specific and some survey numbers. For reference, you've got some supporting information before you: rent rolls, financial statements. We provide those to show that, look, we're not making these numbers up. This is the actual support there. What I'm going to do is, essentially go over the income approach calculation that you have in your packets. It's just a one-pager. It's entitled Income Approach, and I'll just go from the top down here. But keep in mind that the calculation here is really meant to derive a net operating income number, and then to divide that by a capitalization rate, which is essentially represents an estimated rate of return to come to a valuation of the property. Start off with an average market rent at the property of $504 per unit per month. And that comes from that January 2018 rent roll. Now, to be sure, most units generate less than market amounts on a monthly basis, but we use that that market number as opposed to sort of discounted or incentive number just to stay conservative. As with the other apartment complexes I'll discuss tonight, we're assuming an additional 5% on top of that to account for other income. That would be things like application fees, late fees, that sort of thing. And then again, as with the other complexes I'll discuss here tonight, we discount that with an estimated vacancy rate of 9.3%. And now that's a number that actually comes from a CoStar survey of Grand Forks specific apartments from the first quarter of 2018. So that gets us to a gross operating income number for the property. To get to a net number, we're factoring in expenses, and here this one is slightly different than the other properties I'll be discussing. We've estimated that at $216 per unit. That's a lower number than I'll mention in with other calculations here, and that just really reflects the relatively small unit size in this building. We then assume, again, another standard number, 3% for management fees, and then here $150 per unit for reserves. So that essentially gets us to that net operating income number. The final step is to apply a capitalization rate, and what we're using here in these calculations for the Verge and then also for the other apartments here, we're using a base cap rate of 8% even to arrive at our valuation. Now that cap rate is based on just general market performance. It's supported by realty rates surveys that we see just from the Midwestern region, and then specifically with some Grand Forks data that's compiled by CoStar. Now, I will say if our prior discussions with city staff are any indication, we think that this is the primary point of disagreement between the taxpayers' numbers and then the city's numbers. We believe that the city uses an unusually low cap rate in its income calculations. Our research from that general time period suggests cap rates in that sort of 7 to 8.5%. I know in the past we've seen the city using something between a 6 to 7%. So we do have a difference there, and we believe that ends up being sort of the main driver of the difference there. But that's the calculation. Like I said, that's this is something that I'll go over a little bit more quickly with each of these other properties. There's a fair amount of assumptions that are shared across each of those properties, but that's the calculation in detail, and that's where the taxpayer is coming up with this $17.6 million valuation. So I think with that, certainly happy to answer questions if there are any, or frankly to do what makes sense. I think given the similarities here between this and the other properties. So.
Thank you so much. Any council questions? You'll have to speak up since everyone's on Zoom. Otherwise, we can go back to staff if we don't have any questions.
Okay. If somebody does have questions, they can certainly just holler out and we can answer them. So for Campus Crest, this is a slightly different multifamily property than a typical apartment. It rents by the bedroom, as Mr. Tibble stated. That's where the 600 units comes into play. A typical unit type a typical apartment would not rent by the bedroom, okay? But this is more of a privately owned dorm complex with shared kitchens, living room, but each bedroom is keyed and has its own bathroom. So it's rented strictly by the bedroom and sharing those common living areas. Our 2018 valuation, assessor's evaluation is $25,084,300. The applicant's application is requesting that the true and full value be reduced to $21,744,000. In our assessing department, we use the cost approach, we use income approach, and gross income multipliers from our local market sales. The use of those approaches demonstrates that our true and full value is fair and equitable. The applicant submitted only an income approach to value for this property. I've included in our staff report values from all the approaches in your staff report so that you can reference them if you, without me speaking to them piece by piece. We reviewed and the rent rolls and income statements submitted by the owners with only an income approach submitted. When we went through those income statements, we found that this type of multifamily rental does have higher expenses. So applying market rents, applying our local vacancy that we get from our apartment association every second quarter of every year, and recognizing that this property has higher expenses, we find that our estimated net operating income from our local market is similar to this property's actual operating income. So this tells us that our model is calibrated to the market. So again, the difference here is cap rates between what the applicant is using and what we are using. The cap rate used by the applicant comes from the regional surveys. Our model uses cap rates that we derive from our local sales between the years of 2015 and 2017. So using those same local market sales, we've developed gross income multipliers. A gross income multiplier is calculated by dividing the sale price by the estimated potential income, and the use of that market-derived gross income multiplier supports our value as well. So our model is based and calibrated on market data that's available at the time, and our model is continually building and being solidified. The staff report for this property contains all the data to support our value of $25,084,300, and my recommendation is to deny the requested value reduction for this property. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Are there any questions?
I do have one question. Mr. Weber and Ms. Bach and Mr. Veen, you guys have been on the council longer than I have, and I think I'm on year 5 right now, and I feel like every year this comes around on a number of different properties and whatnot, and whenever I see Mr. Tibbles or anybody else bring something forward, I based on what I recall, I only see one approach being used by the attorneys for these different taxpayers, and then I see the city of Grand Forks using 3 approaches. And maybe I can read between the lines of why only one approach is being used by the attorney that's representing them. But Mr. Tibbles, do you have any insight of why you're not running the other 2 as well?
No, I appreciate that question, and I'll tell you the answer. The answer to that is that her position is that the income approach is frankly the most relevant in this situation. I think there's certainly a couple points, right? Number one, the state law, would suggest that, that it isn't necessary to run all 3. With that said, running multiple approaches as as a check is important. But in this situation with commercial properties, we really do feel that the income approach, is the most relevant for a few reasons. First off, getting a sense of what sort of income a commercial property can generate is frankly the reason why folks buy commercial properties, right? I mean, now it's different. It's different if I'm looking to buy a home, right? I want to know the cost to construct a home that of the sort that I'm looking at. That sort of thing matters. But in this context, that, if anything, is most useful as a check. Now we don't have those in here, frankly, because oftentimes that sort of thing is very, very speculative, and serves as, like I said, just really serves as a check. The income approach uses actual property-specific numbers, and then also some surveyed numbers from the market. Now we have some numbers from the region at large. We certainly have some Grand Forks specific numbers. But really, the whole reason that we focus on that is that we believe that is the most relevant approach in this situation.
And I don't disagree with you, but if a business owner is going to look at purchasing property, I'm sure they're going to compare multiple different properties or different items before they purchase them, whether that be something they need to run their business or a building itself. I think it's great to have those three things to look at, because if they're all pointing in the same direction, it's probably correct versus one outlier among the group. And maybe Mr. Weber and Ms. Mock or Mr. Veen can provide some more insight for me of what you guys have seen in prior years.
Vice President Mock?
Yes, Mr. Weber.
First of all, Mr. Weigel, regarding any additional experience, these are complicated matters, and it feels like we look at them once a year primarily, so I have to relearn them kind of each year. But these are terribly important. We want a welcoming business environment. We certainly don't want to be overtaxing anyone. On the other hand, this is a key part of the revenue stream for the city. Mr. Tibbles, thanks for your presentations. You're always a gentleman when you come to our meetings. Whether this is a question for yourself or Ms. Lejeune, it seems that one of the key points of contention here, if that's the right word, has to do with the gross income multiplier. And Ms. Lejeune, can you speak to that? And also, Ms. Lejeune, is the process that you're using, it's consistent with state law, right? How much flexibility does the city assessor have in these matters?
Well, our job is to place a value on a property that is market-based, and that is where our information comes from. That is how we come to our values, by using these approaches to value. So I'm not sure if you were talking about gross income multipliers or if you're talking about cap rate. You stated the gross income multiplier, but I think as far as the income approach goes, which Mr. Tibbles has used in his income approach, is a cap rate, which seems to be the more consistent difference of opinion.
Very good, thanks. And he says that, well, what is the cap rate that we're using? He mentioned that he thought
We
that...
are using an 8% loaded cap rate.
And who sets that? That's based upon your surveys, your experience with the local market?
Yes, that is based on the sales that occurred in the last 3 years prior to this assessment date, and deriving those cap rates from those sales that the market is using.
And this is done in consistent with North Dakota Century Code. How much flexibility do you have as an assessor in setting those rates?
Well, I want to use the market data to set those values. I don't want to, if I have market data that tells me something different, then that is something I should consider. But when I have market data sitting there for use, that is what I need to use to support my value.
Very good, thank you. And Mr. Tibbles, what is it that you're seeing incorrect, or how are you seeing this cap rate differently?
Well, and I think, just maybe one point of clarification. I know, at times, and we ran into this, I think, a little bit last year. We had discussed this. When I say we're using an 8%, base cap rate, that's unloaded, and that it doesn't factor in the real estate taxes. So when Ms. Laser says 8%, she's using an 8% loaded cap rate. Our equivalent there would be a 9.69%. So 1.69% difference. That's really what it comes down to. And I think, again, we've certainly appreciated the discussions that we've had with her in the past. And I think the issue is, we've seen research just from what we've used over the last few years, that would support our numbers, more so than the cities. And again, it really does come down to that cap rate. And I guess, just I think, one additional point, if I may, just on that point, I think the fact that, we can largely isolate the difference there, kind of our disparity there, really serves as confirmation that, for the most part, we're in the ballpark, right? I think Councilmember Weigel had mentioned earlier, certainly the other approaches are important and useful in serving as that check. But I think that we get down to just this one disagreement really shows that our numbers are not far off. It is just the matter of estimating what is that appropriate cap rate.
Very good. I'm feeling like this is deja vu, because I believe last year I made the exact same mistake in terms of a gross income multiplier and the cap rate. And I think we had this same discussion last year. So I thank you both for your responses again this year. Yeah.
Mr. Hodak.
I'd just like to quickly respond to Mr. Weigel's question. He asked about why one approach to value and not more. I think while the income approach is important when you're dealing with apartment properties, that doesn't make the cost approach or the gross income multiplier less important. A gross income multiplier is a simple number. It's the sale price divided by the gross income to come up with a multiplier. We do that on all of our sales. We track our sales for 3 years prior to the assessment date. So we have a good sample of gross income multipliers that we can take from our market and apply to the subject property. And now on a cost approach, assessors use the cost approach more than a typical appraiser, and the reason for that is because it creates equity. A cost approach is going to look at the cost, replacement cost new less depreciation plus land value. In our cost approach, everything's based on the same cost manual. The land values are equitable. The depreciation tables are all based, it's all table driven, and that helps us to create equity. If a property's got sprinkler system, that we add for that. If a property's got mezzanines, we add for that. The square footage of the lot, we add for that. There's lots of things that are considered in a cost approach that aren't considered in an income approach or a sales comparison approach. That's why it's important to do as many approaches as you can, because each one has strengths and weaknesses. And the more approaches you use, the better your value conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council members? Anyone like to make a motion?
Ms. Mock, I'll make a motion to accept city staff's recommendation.
We have a motion by Mr. Weigel.
This is Ken Behan, I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Right, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So we'll take the next two items on the agenda for Ashland 2151 36th Avenue South and Ashland 2051 36th Avenue South. These two properties are, make up their complex of called Ashland Apartments, and I think it's just easier to take those in with one set of comments. So I'll let Mr. Tibble speak first.
Yeah, so this complex, 84 unit apartment complex, our position is true and full value is just over $5.9 million. Similarly, that's a result of an income approach calculation. Using that same methodology. Again, this is supported in your packets. We have rent rolls and financial statements. Rent rolls from January 17 and then January of 18, and then year-end financials from 16 and 17. This here, I guess, again, I went over our methodology before this. The difference is here, average market rent at this property is $11.60 per month. Again, that's from the rent roll. Here, with Ashland, and then also with the other apartment complexes, that I'm discussing here tonight, we actually for expenses we're using a surveyed number of $339 per unit. Now that's higher than what I just mentioned when discussing the Verge complex. And again, that's because we view this as being kind of more of a typical unit size. And that being the reason there. And I think also with that in mind, we use $250 per unit for reserves as opposed to the $150 that was used for the Verge calculation. Those two numbers will carry forward to the other applications here that we'll discuss shortly. But other than that, again, we're using that 8% cap rate, and really kind of incorporate the comments and discussion from before here. Simply view that as the more appropriate rate to use.
Okay, the assessor's 2018 valuation for the property identified on your agenda as Ashland 2151 36th Avenue South is $3,884,300. The applicant is requesting on their application of $2,843,500. For the item identified on your agenda as Ashland 2051 36th Avenue South, the assessor's valuation is $4,735,900, and the applicant is asking for a reduction down to $3,452,100. We received a combined rent roll and income and expense information for both of these parcels. According to North Dakota Century Code 570208, each parcel must be valued and taxed individually. When you combine two parcels into one economic unit, your value conclusion will be affected, and that does not follow North Dakota Century Code. The cost approach, income approach, and gross income multipliers, again, were used from our local market sales. They demonstrate that our true and full value is fair and equitable. Those approaches and values from those approaches are included in your staff report, and they do support our 2018 valuations. So we reviewed the rent rolls and the income expense statements that were provided, and it appeared that there was something that was incomplete. There were some things that we couldn't make heads or tails of. We did ask for some additional information, and we did not receive any comments with the questions that we had with regard to that. They again only provided us with a combined income approach for both parcels. No income approach to value per parcel was provided to us. So in the income approach, what they used, Mr. Tibble stated, they used averages for income. In other words, they used one rate regardless of the unit type. whether it's a efficiency, a one-bedroom, two-bedroom, three-bedroom, they used one rate. And in my appraiser opinion, that methodology is not proper, and thus their income approach submitted is not reliable and doesn't represent a true and full value. Again, cap rates, we have extracted them from our local market sales. The gross income multipliers support our values. Our model is continually based and calibrated by all those local sales. The requested valuation is based on that combined income approach, and they did not consider the sales or the cost data that would be available in order to provide additional information for this property. So the staff, my staff report for this agenda item as Ashland 2151 36th Avenue South contains the data to support our value of $3,884,300. I recommend to deny that requested reduction. And I will answer any questions.
I do have a question. So you mentioned with the income approach, did you take into account different units and how much those can be rented for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did. We follow the market. We use market rents based on unit type, whether it's efficiency 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is. We do our best to
So you
track.
add all of those into your model?
And those are shown in our
Okay.
income approach included in your staff report.
Any other questions from the council?
Vice President Mock?
Yes, Mr. Weber.
With all respect to Mr. Tibbles and to his clients, this matter seems even more straightforward. I move to uphold the recommended true and full value recommended by the city assessor.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Weigel, will you give a second?
Correct.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Did you have the other Ashland?
Yep, we'll go on to the next one. So the staff report for the agenda item labeled as Ashland 2051 36th Avenue South contains the data again to support our valuation of $4,735,900. I again recommend to deny that requested reduction.
Any comments from the council? Any motions?
I'll make the motion to deny the request and uphold the true and full value.
We have a motion. Is there a
Second.
second?
Second?
A second by Mr. Weber. Mr. Tibbles, did you have anything to say?
Mr. Tibbles, I believe you're muted, or we can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Sorry. If you want to start over.
Thanks for that. That was going to happen inevitably. Just a couple questions, or excuse me, a couple comments, just on that point again. For this property, we're using, again, property-specific rental rate, and I will say that's an average. That's an average across, across the different types of units, and so I think largely getting to the same point there. And then I think just one comment. I know this will come up. I think this does come up with this property, but then also this will come up with the next property as well. The owner operates these as single economic units, and I certainly do understand Ms. Laser makes a valid point. That each individual parcel needs to be valued properly, or needs to be valued individually. Now I will say, I think from our perspective, the numbers that I'm presenting take, on these multi-parcel complexes, they just accumulate, value across those multiple parcels, and we certainly understand that, in order to dispose of each of these applications, you need to assign a certain number to each application. I understand that, but to the extent that, that there would be any sort of disparity or difference, that would be presented by running just a single, income approach calculation on these multi-parcel complexes. Just don't do that as a material difference there. And so that's the reason why we're doing that. We're running that just again on sort of that the numbers as operated by the taxpayer on a single economic unit. So just a couple points on that, but again, this is largely the same calculation. We're using again some property specific numbers, and then also the surveyed numbers that are shared across, as assumptions across each of these calculations.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbles. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously.
Hello, in the same fashion, let's take the next two for South Point 3500 and South Point 3450. Mr. Tibbles, go ahead.
Okay. So South Point, again, this is a 96 unit apartment complex.
Is there any way you can speak up, Mr. Tibbles, or change your volume?
Oh.
We're just having a hard
Certainly,
time.
I appreciate that. Let me try this here. Does that sound any better?
That sounds better.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I guess, this property, 96 unit complex, we believe true and full value of this is $9.86 million. Again, income approach analysis, giving you 2017 and 2018 January rent rolls, and then 2016 and 17 year-end financials. Average market rent at this property is $11.31 per month. Again, average across the different types of units. And again, just kind of going through the calculation sheet here again, you'll see we're using again that same mix of survey data and then specific property specific data here. So I think with that, certainly happy to answer questions on this property. And I'll try not to mute myself.
So South Point 3500, our 2018 valuation for this property is $5,354,800. The applicant is asking on their application for a reduction down to $3,897,200. On South Point 3450, our assessed 2018 valuation is $5,355,600, and the reduction request was for $3,897,800. We did not receive any rent rolls, any income and expense information, or any approach to value on this particular property. We did ask for some and again never received it. We've considered the cost approach, the income approach, the gross income multipliers. They all demonstrate that our true and full value is fair and equitable. Those reports are included in your staff reports. Our value is fair and equitable, and it's based on our local data. The applicant's value request does not represent true and full value and is not based on market data, but I believe as an arbitrary value. So the staff report for agenda item labeled South Point 3500 contains our data, again, to support the value of $5,354,800, and I recommend to deny that applicant's reduced value. Any questions?
Just make one quick point.
Mr. Tibbles, did you want to say?
Gosh, I apologize. I know we had emailed support on this one, but I'm wondering if some of this got stripped in an email filter here. I know I have an email where I sent you that information. Yeah, gosh. No, I certainly apologize. We had certainly intended to provide information here. Not, again, it's largely of the same, the same character as the information that's been provided for these other apartment properties. And to the extent that got lost, I certainly apologize for that miscommunication there.
Is that something he could email between now and the council meeting? Or is that something we can derive from other information that kind of the...
We certainly will take the information. We certainly will look at it. to be very honest with you, my market value, my market rents, my local vacancy, my expense ratios that we have consistently derived from our model and our market sales, I don't believe it's going to change our opinion, but that is never to say that you can't look at information and consider anything that you may not know.
Sure. So, Mr. Tibbles, if you wanted to email that, it sounds like we can certainly receive it and have department staff review.
Yeah, and we would certainly be happy to, to re-email that. I know with some of the other properties, we had sent a hard copy as well. I don't believe we had done so with the South Point property, but we would be happy to do so.
Great. Any further council discussion, questions, motions?
I'll move to uphold the staff recommendation.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Next.
Yes, so your agenda item labeled South Point 3450, staff report again contains our data, supporting our value of $5,355,600, and I again recommend to deny that requested reduced value.
Thank you. We'll take it back to the council. Any further questions?
Assuming this is consistent with what we've been hearing, I'll move to uphold the staff recommendation again.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Weigel. Again, I think, Mr. Tibbles, if you want to email any documents, staff is open to that. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Legacy Apartments?
Yes, and we will take the next four all in one set of comments, as they do make up the applicant's legacy apartment complex, and we received combined information, so it's easy to have all those comments together. But again, I'll let Mr. Tibbles speak.
Mr. Tibbles?
Yeah, similar comments from this perspective here. The average market rent is $10.50 per month, and that's an actual, it's an average, but it's an actual number that's driving the income calculations here, using again the same sorts of assumptions and methodologies that were used with the prior properties here. I believe we did send a hard copy of this information in, so I know that this information has been provided and reviewed and that sort of thing. But I would just also just to say on the record, I mean, we are certainly happy. I mean, to the extent that folks have questions, would like further detail from us, we are certainly happy to provide that, in advance of the city council meeting, if that would be of some use to you.
Thank you. Any council comments? Staff?
That's fine.
Recommendation?
Okay, so Legacy 5, 6, and 7 are, the 2018 assessed value is $9,956,800, and it's being the request is to lower it to $8,374,800. For Legacy 3500 30th Avenue South, our 2018 valuation is $6,348,000, being requested to lower the value down to $5,339,400. Legacy 2600 South 34th Street, our 2018 value is $8,612,000. The applicant has asked for the reduction to $7,243,700. And the Legacy 2700 South 34th Street, our 2018 valuation is $5,170,300, and it's being asked to be reduced down to $4,349,800. Again, we received, as we had in the previous application, we have combined rent roll and income and expense information. According to that North Dakota Century Code of 570208, requiring that each parcel be valued and taxed individually. Again, combining these parcels into the one economic unit will affect the value conclusion and doesn't follow that North Dakota Century Code. We went through the cost approach, income approach, and gross income multipliers from our local market to demonstrate that our true and full value is fair and equitable. We reviewed the rent roll and expense information, and we had some questions with regard to this one as well, with no additional information that we received back. Only an income approach was submitted, and that approach to value included all 4 parcels. So an income approach per parcel wasn't provided again, and our income approach, the income approach that they used, again, used those averages for income. And in my appraiser opinion, that methodology is not proper and makes their income approach submitted not reliable and doesn't represent that true and full value. Cap rate we used is from our local market. The gross income multipliers support our value. The staff reports for these 4 parcels do contain all the data to support our values by parcel. Going back, my recommendation on agenda item legacy 5, 6, and 7 is to deny the 2018 abatement and uphold our 2018 valuation of $9,956,800. Questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Any motions?
I'll move approval of staff recommendation. Yep.
Motion by Weber, second by Bean. I do want to say thank you, Mr. Tibbles, for being here. Not easy, but thank you. You're always welcome. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, we'll continue on for the next, one by one for the next 3. Agenda item labeled as Legacy 3500 30th Avenue South. Again, I recommend to deny that 2018 abatement and uphold our 2018 value of $6,348,000.
Is there a motion?
I'll move approval of the staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Bean, second by Weber. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Agenda item labeled Legacy 2600 South 34th Street. I recommend that we deny that 2018 abatement and uphold our 2018 value of $8,612,000.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept staff recommendation.
Motion by Weigel,
Second.
second by Bean. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously.
And lastly, the agenda item labeled Legacy 2700 South 34th Street. I recommend that we deny that 2018 abatement and uphold the 2018 value of $5,170,300.
Is there a motion?
I'll move approval of the staff report.
Motion by Bean,
Second.
second by Weigel. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Again, thank you, Mr. Tibbles.
I appreciate that. You get me up for one more here, though.
He's also representing Coles as the next item on the agenda.
Wonderful.
Go ahead, Mr. Tibbles.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so this is slightly different. This is a department store constructed in 2006. I'm just going to point out that the gross building area of this store is just over 68,000 square feet, which is larger than what Kohl's is actually building now. That's kind of on the larger than what the retail sector is generally building now. This was originally assessed at $6.2 million, just over that. Our opinion is that true and full value is $4.03 million. That's based on the result of an analysis using 2 methods, cost and income approach. I'll go over those. The income approach is slightly different than the calculation that was used for the apartments that we just discussed. I'll go through that in a little bit, and then also the cost analysis as well. Just a couple introductory comments on this one. I mean, you're certainly well aware that the retail industry is in turmoil. right now, and it's certainly been disrupted by e-commerce, and then the coronavirus, of course, has accelerated that as well. You might also be aware that Kohl's actually made the difficult decision to close all of their stores nationwide early on in the outbreak for nearly 2 months. That's not something that all folks in the retail sector had done. But let's be honest, brick and mortar retail has been hurting for some time now. The reality is that these sorts of properties, they're just not as valuable as they once were, and the analysis here really shows that. I think what I'll do is I'll start off by going through the income approach analysis here, because that actually gets weighted higher in this opinion of value. The income approach uses a few different market-based factors and has generally tried to use some conservative assumptions that would tend to indicate an increased value. For market rent, we used a $5.80 per square foot rent, and that comes from a review of leases that Kohl's has entered into in comparable communities in the West and then the Midwest regions. That actually comes from the 2010 to 2016 time frame, so it's a large time frame, but a good sample size there. They actually range from $3 per square foot up to $5.79 per square foot. And though this is an older property, again, it's kind of obsolete in the sense that it's larger than what's needed in this sector right now. We still used a higher lease rate just as a conservative matter. We then assumed just a standard measure of vacancy and collection loss at 5%. For expenses, we assumed a 2.76% management fee, and then just 22 cents per square foot in reserves. And those are both drawn from a PricewaterhouseCoopers retail real estate report for first quarter of 2018. We then used a cap rate for this building of 8.1%, which is that's actually coming from a survey for comparable Midwest neighborhood and community shopping centers from the fourth quarter of 2017. So not exactly as of the assessment date, but very close. We think close enough to be useful. And actually as part of that, we're being conservative in that would actually be representing a rate for what would be considered a tier 2 building. But this, again, I'm just kind of considering that it's outdated and larger. We think it would actually be more appropriate to be categorized as a tier 3. Based on all of that, income approach analysis, that presents an indicated income value of $4.3 million. So that's the income approach that was used. We also used a cost approach in this to serve as a check. Now, we used data from the Marshall Valuation Service numbers here. Used a base cost to construct a discount store of $64.40 per square foot. And then layer in additional expenses that accounts for heating and cooling, the sprinkler system. We then also layer in multipliers to take account of the height of the building, perimeter of the building, the local construction factors. Again, we're trying to get to a replacement cost for this building, and that number gets to $4.6 million. Then deduct for depreciation, 3 different kinds here: physical depreciation, functional obsolescence, and then economic obsolescence. And I certainly understand that these are all sorts of estimates, but the numbers that were used here are really what the taxpayer views as kind of an accurate estimate of that obsolescence. For physical depreciation, simply compared the age of this store to the expected useful life for a department store of this nature. Marshall suggests that this is 40 years. The property was 12 years old at the time, and so use the 30% factor, just doing the math there. For functional obsolescence, I mentioned the size of this store early on, just to note that newer coal stores are roughly 25% smaller. And so to estimate that physical obsolescence, we compared that 25% as a number there. And then for an economic obsolescence factor, I'll note that sales at this store, when compared to other coal stores in North Dakota, and then also other similarly sized coal stores across the nation, the sales at this store have been lower. They were lower in the year prior to the assessment date, and roughly 20% less per square foot. And so we used that as, again, an estimate of that economic obsolescence number. Applying those discounts, and then also adding in value for the parking lot, and then just improvements at the land, indicated value under the cost approach is a $3.1 million number. Now what we do is reconcile those. In the end, we weighted the income approach higher, 75%, used 25% on the cost approach. Again, for the points that I had made earlier, we truly do believe that the income approach is a more relevant analysis for a commercial property such as these. And that sort of, once you apply that weighting, that gets us to our $4.03 million number there. Now, typically, right, you can use, again, that third analysis. You can use a sales approach to serve comparable sales as yet another check. But in this situation, simply we're unable to locate any comparable sales of freestanding retail properties of 50,000 square feet or more since 2014. And so we just did not feel that was an appropriate analysis to even undertake. So with that in mind, that comes, that's what presents that $4.03 million opinion of value. I would say with that, certainly happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hodak, did you have something?
Yes, thank you. I've got a few comments. This request involves the Coles Building, located at 3301 32nd Avenue South. The 2018 true and full value is $6,210,800. The applicant is asking that the value be reduced to $4,030,000. We've consistently used the cost approach and the income approach to value retail properties, and our cost approach value is $6,210,800. Our income approach value is $6,173,000, supporting our cost approach value and our true and full value. I have documented rents for retail space in the city of Grand Forks. It ranges anywhere from $3.50 to $11 a square foot for freestanding retail. These rates range based on size, age, and location. My estimate of market rent for the subject property for 2018 was $8 per square foot. That's what we used in our income approach. They did complete two approaches to value. In my opinion, their cost approach is completely unreliable. In both approaches to value, what they did is they valued it from the tenant's perspective. When we're doing mass appraisal for tax purposes, we're valuing these properties from the landlord's perspective. What is the building worth in terms of what it's generating in rent and the economics of it? The idea that the sales are down, so it's not worth, it's worth something less is not an appropriate adjustment in the cost approach. And the idea that it's bigger than what Kohl's deems an optimum size for their business model also doesn't make that additional square footage worth any less on the market in Grand Forks. They only added $52,500 for the value of the parking. Now that includes parking, curb, gutter, storm sewer. I would estimate a value of more like $750,000 would be the cost of that. They keep talking about this old building It was built in 2006. It was 12 years old as of the assessment date on this year. That is not an old building by any standards. So I would recommend that you completely disregard the cost approach in this case. Again, I think they're valuing this property on the income approach as a leasehold interest. They're taking these rents that they've paid somewhere else and applying it to this property. But in my income approach, I'm looking at the value as the property is complete. In other words, that $6 rent might be good somewhere, but what that is it's a base rent. And they're valuing, in my opinion, the leasehold interest of that tenant. That tenant is going to make improvements. The landlord's going to make improvements when somebody moves in. I'm valuing those improvements as well. I don't care who's paying for those improvements. Those improvements are part of the property, and I think they're missing that in their analysis. The 2018 true and full value of the subject property is fair and equitable with similar properties in Grand Forks. I used, again, the same cost tables, the same rents, the same cap rates. We have very good consistency in our retail space. The true and full value is also fair and equitable with other Kohl's properties in the state of North Dakota. All of that information is in my staff report. I'd also like to mention that from 2015 to 2017, we had 4 or 5 retail properties sell in the city of Grand Forks. Our sales ratios indicated a ratio of anywhere from 56% to 99%. So that means in all cases, our true and full value was below the sale price. That is further support that our model is calibrated to our local market. The value of the subject property has gone down. In 2017, we were at $6.9 million. For 2018 and for 2019, we were at $6.2 million. And for 2020, we're at $5.7 million. Based on all of that information, it's my opinion that the 2018 true and full value is fair and equitable with like properties. And I would recommend that you uphold the true and full value of $6,210,800 for the 2018 tax year. Be happy to answer any questions.
I move support of staff recommendation on this, and if there's a second, then I'd like to make a further comment.
All right,
I'll make a second.
motion and a second. Mr. Weber, comment?
Yes, Vice President Mock, fellow council members, one of the things that I'm hearing here concerns me. There's a perpetuation of this narrative that retail is dying or in trouble in Grand Forks. Many of these large big box stores, national chains, are pulling out of Grand Forks not because of local conditions, but because of national dynamics. Very often, these are profitable stores. Grand Forks shoppers are buying local, and they're supporting these local stores who frequently do not respond in kind by keeping full inventory here. But at any rate, these stores are often shut down, not because we're charging too much in property taxes or any local factors, but because of national macro dynamics, macroeconomic factors. So with that little editorial, I look forward to voting in favor of the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Any further comments? There's a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. And Mr. Hodek.
Thanks so much, folks. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tibbles. The ESTAC unit, those are tabled?
Yeah, I would just ask for a motion to table those until February 8th. I'm just waiting for a little bit more information.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Weigel. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
With that, item 2.2, budget amendments on the Health Department CARES funding.
Madam Vice Chair, this is Debbie Swanson from the Grand Forks Public Health Department. I have 2 budget amendments to present if you are ready.
Yes, please do.
These are two of a total of 4 budget amendments that I anticipate. Currently, at least in 2020, we were funded with CARES funding with a direct grant from the North Dakota Department of Health. That will be carried over into 2021, and that will be a future budget amendment. These two amendments represent different sources of funding. The first one I would like to address is the budget amendment for CARES funding that was received by the city through the CRF funds. And the city has allocated to the health department $68,170 to support our COVID response activities. And that was funded by the 2 payments to the city for law enforcement payroll expenses. That was the formula used for all cities and counties. This hasn't been expensed in 2020, and thus it's considered cash carryover for 2021. So you can see the 2 documents behind there have all of the categories that we anticipate spending the funding in. It's based on the activities that we will do and our anticipated expenditures. And I would be happy to answer any questions from you and from the city council members. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Ms.
Mr.
Mock?
Weigel? Yes, Mr. Weigel.
Just real quick, Ms. Swanson, I got my vaccine last Wednesday, not because of being a council member, but because of my full-time job. And I just want to commend you and your staff. It was easy, it was quick. I was in there, out of there after my 15-minute wait, and they were all fantastic and did a great job. And my arm didn't even hurt the next day. So kudos to them, and thank you for what you guys are doing, getting that vaccine out there. And I'll make a motion to approve the budget amendments.
There's a motion. Thank you, Mr. Weigel.
I'll second.
Second by Weber. Any further comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And you had one more, Ms. Swanson?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair and members of the City Council, I have a second budget amendment. This represents funding from the North Dakota Department of Health. It's called an Epidemiology and Lab Capacity Grant, or ELC, for COVID-19 response. This funding period extends into 2022, anticipating that we will be having some response activities for that length of time. The positions supported by the grant are public health program specialists, primarily doing contact tracing, case investigations, and then any vaccine administration support and education. So once again, the budget amendment is attached. There are a couple of pages. This budget will be part of our public health funding from the state health department, the initial funding through this federal grant. We anticipated the positions that we would be supporting with this and put that in the relative categories that you can see on the documents behind the staff report. Happy to answer any questions about this.
Thank you so much. Any questions, motions?
Move approval.
Motion by Veen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Weber. Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, Ms. Swanson. And thank you for everything you're doing with vaccines and contact tracing.
Thank you.
Item 2.3, contract for NDDEQ's 2020 Volkswagen Settlement Emission Mitigation Program. Good evening.
Good evening. If council recalls, back in October, you approved the city and fire department applying for the Volkswagen Settlement Emissions Program grant. We were notified in December that we were successful under the fire department's request for an aerial apparatus for the amount up to $632,500. With this funding, we would be ordering a new aerial apparatus, and it takes approximately a year to build one of these pieces of equipment. And the amount that we're asking approval for is somewhere between $1.265 and $1.3 million for that cost, of which approximately half would come out of our capital reserve account, which there is funding for. This program would require the 1996 vehicle that we used as part of the application to basically be decommissioned. It requires salvage verification from a salvage yard, and the vehicle needs to have its motor, a 3-inch hole drilled in the motor, and the frame rail's cut in half, so they want these engines out of commission. So at that, we're requesting approval to sign the contract, which is included with the staff report. It would require ordering the vehicle, paying for it, and then submitting for reimbursement once all the paperwork is submitted. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you so much. Any questions from council members?
I move approval.
Motion by Bean, second by Weber. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
So much. Right before we get to 2.4, Mr. Grasser, I believe you wanted to comment on budget items.
Thank you. I got a general comment to make. We've got a slate of engineering comments coming, project numbers coming through on the agenda tonight. If you're paying close attention, if you look at where the budget lines are on a number of these items, you'll see that we're either exceeding the budgets, or in some cases there's items in there that don't even have a budget actually in the 2021 budget at this point in time. If you remember back when we did this work last year in April and May, there was a lot of concern about income and things like that, so a lot of projects got cut back, some got eliminated. The good news is our income sources have been coming back, better than we had thought. Plus, we also have received the dollars there for the prairie dog money, which Todd reported on, I think, last week. So basically, we recognize that when you look at the actual 21 budget, a lot of these items are going to exceed, but we are going to balance all those things out with the additional income sources and the prairie dog monies. So again, rather than have those come up potentially on any individual items, I kind of caught those as a whole, and I'll stand for any questions we may have on that.
Great, thank you. Any initial questions on? No, seeing none. Thank you so much, Mr. Grasser. So item 2.4, create special assessment district for project number 7539, district number 737, paving Oscarville. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice President Mock, members of the council. As I go through a number of projects tonight, I would like to start out with introducing our engineers who are in the crowd tonight, because many of them are the hidden heroes behind these projects, and they don't often get to bring their face in front of you. So for our Oscarville project tonight, I would like to recognize Matt McGuire. Go ahead and stand up, Matt. Thanks. He's the brains behind this. So Oscarville is the industrial area immediately east of I-29 and north of Gateway Drive. It consists of the avenues 20th, 24th, 26th, and 27th Avenue North, and North 43rd and 44th Street. This area has been under development for a few years. Back in 2017, the sanitary sewer was installed. This summer, the storm sewer was installed, and this project proposes construction of pavement for this industrial park. Currently, it is a gravel rural section. We are proposing a 9-inch concrete road with curb and gutter and streetlights to be installed to support this industrial park. The staff's total construction cost is estimated to be roughly $4.6 million for this project. For the local streets, which comprise 26th Avenue, 20th Avenue North, North 43rd, and North 44th Street, this cost would be 100% special assessed to the benefiting properties. For those streets that are classified, which 20th Avenue North is a classified street and 24th Avenue North functions as a classified street, those would apply a 80-20 cost share. 80% would be paid for by the city from Fund 4815, and 20% would be special assessed to the benefiting properties. So with that, tonight we're recommending approval of the special assessment district, creation of the district, approval of the engineer's report, and directing engineering to prepare plans and specifications and advertise for bids for these projects.
Thank you so much. Any initial comments from council?
Move approval.
Motion by Weigel,
Second.
second by Veen. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Item 2.5, create special assessment district for project numbers 35, 15, 16, 17, and 18. District numbers 580, 351, 581, 756. Sanitary sewer, water main, storm sewer, and paving streetlights for Crary's 11th. Good evening.
Good evening, Vice President Mock and members of the council. The projects that are before you consist of installing sanitary sewer, water main, storm sewer, paving, and streetlights to serve properties within the newly platted Crary's 11th edition and Cherry Street from 58th Avenue South to 62nd Avenue South. The request for the request for Crary's 11th edition to have utilities and pavement installed has been initiated by the developer, Crary Real Estate. As for Cherry Street, that is a classified street with the utilities being special assessed to benefiting properties, and the paving and street lightings will have a city share. Current city policy is to fund 80% construction for pavement and streetlights for classified streets, with the remaining 20% to be special assessed to the benefiting properties. The 2021 budget for Cherry Street project was originally planned to extend the pavement from 60th Avenue South to 62nd Avenue South, with the section of Cherry Street from 58th Avenue South to 60th Avenue South being constructed in 2020. Since that section of Cherry Street was not constructed in 2020, we are proposing to construct Cherry Street from 58th Avenue South to 62nd Avenue South under these projects. Any additional costs associated with this expanded scope will come from the Street and Infrastructure Fund 4815, and in an event that adequate funds are not available, a budget amendment would be requested at that time. Current city policy for water main is to pay for the increased material costs for upsizing the water main from 8-inch pipe and fittings. The water main along Cherry Street is proposed to be installed as a 12-inch water main. The city would pay for the increased cost from the 8-inch pipe and fittings to the required 12-inch pipe and fittings. Total assessment cost for the sanitary sewer is currently estimated to be $644,800. The total assessment cost for the water main is estimated to be $488,600, with a city share for upsizing of estimated at $18,000. The total assessment cost for storm sewer is estimated to be $764,000, and the total assessment cost for the paving and street lighting is estimated to be $1,274,800, and the city share for the paving and street lighting only on the Cherry Street portion is currently estimated to be $758,000. Water and sewer is considered a health and safety infrastructure improvement project and therefore cannot be protested as per state law. Paving and streetlights are protestable per state law, and the protest period is scheduled to expire on March 12, 2021. Approval of plans and specifications is currently scheduled for February 8th of 2021 at the Committee of the Whole. Staff recommended action is to approve the engineer's report, create the special assessment district for projects 8315 District 580, Project 8316 District 351, Project 8317 District 581, and Project 8318 District 758.
Thank you. Comments from council?
I'd move approval.
Oh, motion by Veen. Is there a second?
I'll second, but I have a question, a point of clarification.
Go ahead, Mr. Weber.
If I may. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I remember, I know that we have agreed to use the sales tax to cover 80% of the construction costs for paving and streetlights in neighborhoods. I don't remember being aware that we were doing this for new construction. I thought we were doing that for existing neighborhoods. Can someone correct me or inform me on the history of that decision?
Well, it's a classified street. I'll let you go.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. A very good question. The city's cost share would apply only towards the Cherry Street construction, which is a classified street. And by policy, the city would have a cost share for that. Construction of the local streets in the Crary's 11th development would be 100% special assessed to the landowners.
Thanks for that clarification. Very, very much appreciated. I'm ready to vote.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.6, create special assessment district for project number 8312, district number 755, 2021 concrete panel replacement and grind on 24th Avenue South.
Thank you. Our project engineer for this is Logan Latex here. Logan joined us 9 or 10 months ago and is one of our rising stars on staff here. So this project is proposing to do a replacement of concrete panels and a grinding for 3 sections of 24th Avenue South. Each section is roughly 1/2 mile long. The sections are from South Washington Street to 20th Street, from South 20th Street to Columbia Road. Notably, we are skipping the next section from Columbia Road to South 34th, and I'd be glad to discuss why. And the third section for this project would be from South 34th Street to South 42nd Street. The reason we're skipping the one section mentioned is that is in the worst condition, and we are applying a rehabilitative method of removing selective panels and grinding. We feel that section may be a little bit, it is definitely in worse condition, and this approach, we're not sure it's adequate for providing a better product in that area. So reconstruction is one possibility. We'd kind of like to see how these 3 sections turn out first before we commit to a course of action in that 1/2 mile stretch. So these 3 sections in this project, they vary in age from 23 to 43 years of age. They're definitely aging, and our intent here is to provide an extended lifespan using a cost-effective method and provide better ride quality for traffic. The estimated construction cost is roughly $1.4 million. The city's share for this, let me back up, there would be an 80-20 cost share applied to this. The city's share is roughly $1.1 million, which is budgeted for in Fund 4815 from the street maintenance program. And with that, we are recommending approval of creation of the district, approval of the engineer's report, and direction of engineering to prepare plans and specifications and advertise for bid for these projects.
I'll move approval with a question.
Motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Veen. Mr. Weber, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Are there any plans to reach out to the property owners on that stretch that will not be completed at this time to inform them of why that's happening?
We had intended to have a public input meeting for the affected properties, but to your point, we could always extend that invite if we felt we would get some valuable information from them or perspective. I do see your point there.
Thanks.
And Mr. Lieberman, on that, when would you expect to bring forward a plan for that section that you wouldn't do this year? Would that be in the following year?
This would be for construction in 2021, so we anticipate bringing the plans and specifications to the council. Pardon me, I'm going to check my timeline to make sure I'm correct here. The Committee of the Whole will, we intend to bring our approval of plans and specifications by January 25th.
But for that section that you weren't going to do with this?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Would that be a year delay compared to these 2021 projects?
At least 1 year delay. It would really depend on what the appropriate course of action is. If if, based on our observations from this year's work, we feel that something more involved is required, it could become a budgetary issue. So I would say it's fair to say at least a one-year delay.
I think maybe what Mr. Weber was getting at, it might be a good idea to reach out to those landowners so they know why they're being delayed and just give them an expectation on timeline so they know to expect it. Further comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Item 2.7, create special assessment district for project number 8282, district number 754, 2021 mill and overlay on North 3rd and 9th Avenue North.
Thank you. Our engineer is also Logan Latexier on this project. Part of our portfolio each year in streets projects is identifying asphalt streets that are in need of a mill and overlay. We spent quite a few man-hours this summer sending a team literally driving the streets of Grand Forks to identify those asphalt streets that are in the worst condition and really need mill and overlay first above all others. We've received input from not only from the council but also from citizens, from Public Works, and we have driven other streets ourselves, and the list in front of you tonight we believe is the worst of the worst. These are all in very poor condition and in need of a asphalt mill and overlay. Total construction cost is estimated to be roughly $1.2 million. There would be an 80-20 cost share applied to most of these districts. One of them, the district immediately south of Memorial Park Cemetery, we are recommending an 85% city cost share. The reason for that is the cemetery itself is not subject to special assessment. Therefore, we feel an additional 5% city cost share would apply a fair benefit burden to the property owners in that district. So with that, we are recommending approval of the engineer's report, creation of the special assessment district, and direction of engineering to develop plans and specifications for these projects.
So moved.
Moved by Weber,
Second.
second by Veen. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.8, plans and specs for project number 8262, traffic signal at South Washington and 36th Avenue South.
Thank you. The engineer for this project is Anthony Ryan. Anthony joined us 9 or 10 months ago and is another one of our superstars on staff here. This project was brought before the council back on November 2nd for approval of an engineering agreement with Houston Engineering. Since then, they have developed the plans and specifications, and at the proposal tonight, we are recommending approval of those plans and specifications. The estimated cost for this project is roughly $960,000. Which is 100% paid for from City Fund 4815. So with that, pending any questions, we recommend approval of plans and specifications.
Move approval.
Motion by Weigel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by
By
Veen.
Veen.
Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.9, plans and specs for project number 8280, 2021 asphalt street repairs. Did I just read the wrong one? I did.
Nope, I
Okay,
think that's right.
I'm sorry, I thought I was getting mixed up in between.
Thank you. The engineer for this is Rachel Bramer. Rachel joined us 6 months ago in one of our specialist positions, but she is the engineer behind this great project. So each year we have a city contract to do small spot repairs for asphalt streets in addition to relatively small projects like bike paths, etc. So this year we're recommending a contract for the amount of $50,000 for minor street repair and another $53,000 for a bike path project along Columbia and 62nd Avenue. This is consistent with the amount we spend roughly on an annual basis for these type repairs. So we are recommending approval of plans and specifications for a similar contract in 2021.
Any questions, motions?
I have one quick question. Is this the bicycle path repair? Did I read that right?
Yes, that's correct. There's actually two projects included in one contract here. One portion of it is the asphalt emergency repair piece of it. The other half is an asphalt overlay of a bike path along Columbia, South Columbia Road and 62nd Avenue. It's about a 0.8 mile stretch of 9-foot wide bike path. It's in very poor shape and it really needs an asphalt overlay. So we would include that as part of this contract.
Okay, very good.
Further questions or a motion?
We have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Weber. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.10, change order number 2 for project number 8118, 2020 storm sewer repairs.
Thank you. You have already met Shane Dukeshire, so I won't introduce him again, but this change order is for one of his projects in 2020. Each year we have a contract to do emergency repairs on water main, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, and these are time and materials contracts. It's unplanned work, so throughout the year, if emergencies arise, this contract fixes them. In addition to the majority of the work accomplished is identified by waterworks staff as they go out, assess the system, they identify pipes that need repair, replacement, catch basins that need repair, etc. Those type jobs are identified and accomplished during the same year. So it's not uncommon for us to go a little over or a little under budget on this contract. This change order is requested on the storm sewer repair portion of that contract. We simply accomplished more work last year than we had anticipated for, so we're requesting this change order be approved. It is being brought before City Council because it is above the city engineer's authority for approving change orders of this amount, so we request approval of this.
Any comments from council?
Move approval.
Motion by Veen, second by Weber.
Second, sure.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 211, environmental document for project number 8069, University Avenue Shared Use Path, North 48th to driveway for Park Manor Mobile Home Park. Good evening.
Good evening, Council Vice President Mock and members of the committee. The proposed project was awarded federal funding through the Transportation Alternatives Program with a maximum federal contribution of up to about $290,000 for construction costs only. The environmental document is the first requirement for all federal aid projects. The project engineer who's been heading this up is Christian Danielson, and it's not just the environmental document, but it's also been the public input as well as the design for this project as well. This location has previously been identified in the MPO's 2040 Long-Range Transportation Plan Bike Ped Plan as being a gap within the city's bicycle infrastructure. During the preliminary design of this project, it was discovered that there was 2 blocks of sidewalk that were offset, or the sidewalk was offset from the property line by about 5 feet. Typical city standard is 1 foot off the property line. To reestablish the city standard, the preliminary design included installing a shared use path 1 foot off the property line. As this would move the sidewalk closer to the properties, city staff contacted these 4 property owners in order to gather some preliminary input. In addition to this, we also held a public input meeting, which was attended by myself, Mr. Danielson, as well as Councilmember Weigel on December 10th. After that meeting, staff received 2 comments on this project. Based on the conversations that were had by city staff and comments that these property owners had, that were the desire to be this path to be located on the south side of the road. However, if the path was placed on the north side of the road, 1 block had a preference to keep the berm trees in place, which would move the shared use path closer to the homes and at that 1 foot away from the property line, whereas the other block preferred the shared use path be located at the same location of the sidewalk, which would keep it the same distance from the home with the removal of the trees. One other question that came up during this process was the snow removal. Obviously, nobody wants to shovel an extra 5 feet worth of sidewalk. So we ended up contacting the Public Works Department regarding this, and they ended up indicating that similar to other shared use paths in the area, that Public Works would handle snow removal, which is an added benefit to these adjacent property owners. Overall, the anticipated local cost for this project is about $169,000, with another $290,000 in federal aid. Staff is recommending approval of the environmental document and concurring with the project concepts.
Any questions, comments?
Ms. Mock,
Yes, Mr. Weigel.
thank you for all the work everybody's done. This one's a tough one for me. It obviously runs right through Ward 1. I've thought about it a lot, and I see why engineering would obviously like to have this on the north side of the street. It makes sense. But I too have a lot of reservations. To me, it makes more sense to be on the south side of the road, aligning with the park, and then also connecting to North 55th Street that also has I believe it's a 8-foot sidewalk there, or mixed use path there. I'm going back and forth on this. The one concern that I thought about, I think we spent about an hour on a discussion about a path that went between two houses not too long ago with some property and people using it. The tough part with this is one of the houses is situated very close to the current sidewalk, as you mentioned, and I think if we get any closer to that house, we're going to run into the same concerns that we've already ran into before with a path being so close to the house that somebody could essentially walk by and look in, and homeowners not liking that. So I'm torn on it. I know there was a couple comments that people mentioned, 2 out of the 4, that they'd like to see it on the south side of University Avenue. At this time, I think I'm going to go with their wishes and vote no on staff recommendation, and hopefully we can have it figured out fully by next week on Monday.
I was going to say, if I can address kind of the comment that Councilmember Weigel had, the concern of that property where the sidewalk was relatively close, I believe that was the block where we actually kept it at the existing sidewalk line and shifted it closer to the street. I believe that was that eastern block between 48th and 49th Street.
So there would be no additional sidewalk to the north of what's already there, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so really what we're going to have is a zigzagging sidewalk from 48th to the trailer park area where it would connect with that current 10-foot, correct?
It would have a slight zigzag. It would still remain on the north side, but it would require the removal of the trees in that block.
Perfect. I know I mentioned before that there is a chunk, I believe, from 53rd Street to 55th Street that has 0 sidewalk. I see this as an opportunity to get more people into the park using the services with that 10-foot sidewalk and putting people on that side of the street. I live a mere 2 blocks from this area. I see more people using the park side of that sidewalk, or the park side of that street, than I ever do on the north side of the street, because people are typically walking around the park. I think the 10-foot would benefit more over there as far as usage with biking and walking and everything else. So I commend you guys for all the work you've done. I know we sat together in that public input meeting for an hour and chatted amongst ourselves because nobody showed up. But I know some people had some issues with Zoom. So I know they submitted comments after the fact. But I do think that it's better aimed for a park setting instead of on the residential side of the street.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Weigel, Ken, I have a question for you on this one. What normally I understand what you mean by going back and forth. I've been there several times too. I kind of had the same type of an issue on South Columbia Road where the bike path would be basically on the Alara Center Commission side versus the other side where most of the people were. And in the end, kept it so it was consistent for those, for a bike path. I'm just looking at this one, and you're going from 55th Street continuously all the way up over the overpass to the university. With the one with the jog in it, you'd have to take all those bicyclists, jog across the street, university, go across, jog back up, and twice have to cross University Avenue. I guess I would be a little concerned. I know people that would come to the park are going to have to cross anybody, but those who are using this as transportation would end up creating, to me, a bit of a safety issue when you have to cross University Avenue twice versus continuous on the north side. So I don't know. I struggle with that move or that transition that we would go back. It seems to me in the long run, it would make just more sense to keep it on public right of way, I think, as originally intended. Understanding your concern and your representation for the neighborhood, I just think if you're going to look over the years long term, especially in the winter or fringes where you have people, and more people are using the fat bikes or whatever, it seems to me that the staff recommendation is the better way to go. Maybe not by a lot, but it's still to me seems appropriate. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Absolutely. I think the one thing that I would say to that though is, on the 7 years that I've lived a stone's throw away from this area, I would tell you that the majority of the foot traffic is on that south side of the roadway. There's very little foot traffic on that north side. And I think that's the fact that we eventually go farther west, but where are you going to go? Either you're going to go up 55th to Walmart, but the majority of that traffic is to the park and around the park, whether it be walking or biking. A lot of the college students that live in that area actually live east of the interstate and come from the apartments in that area. So I don't think we're seeing a ton of the foot traffic on that north side of the road. I think we're seeing significantly more on that south side because people are interested in being around the park, walking through the park and utilizing the services that are offered there. So even if you have that 10-foot sidewalk there, people are crossing anyways to get to the park side.
Yeah, and I think I understand that. I think what makes sense, I'm trying to compare that to what I actually have over on 17th Avenue South, where I actually have a bike path on both sides over by Century Elementary, just because we kept it on the south side for the continuity, and then at the intersection, a signalized intersection, we switched to the north side. Would it make sense to put the bike path here on the north side and then look at a system of sidewalks on the south side? So that because the bike path is intended for a lot of that is for bicycle traffic. It's not just the walking traffic that would be there. And I compare that to what we've got over here on 17th.
Ultimately, what I guess my thing would be, and I don't know what the federal grant, if we can even do this, I doubt we could. Ideally, I think the best thing to do would be to finish from North 55th Street to North 53rd Street, that chunk that doesn't have any sidewalk, and completing that versus tearing up something that's already there and in decent shape to put something bigger when we don't even have a complete system on the south side of the street. But I know obviously federal funds are much different to use, and I believe Mr. Grasser said that wasn't even eligible. I could be wrong, but that's kind of where I'm sitting at this point. It's tough because I know city crews are busy in winter removal or snow removal throughout the winter months, and it gets very difficult for them to do the roads and then have to come back and try to take care of some of these 10-foot sidewalks. And I know the Park District is there consistently right away after a snowfall to take care of that. So that's why I'm thinking take that burden off the homeowners and that 10-foot sidewalk on the north side of the road where the Park District's already doing that routinely pretty quickly.
Well, Mr. Grasser is here to address maybe some of those concerns.
Thank you, Vice President Mock. I think you guys have actually hit everything pretty well on the head on the discussions. If I could say on the bike paths and walking, and maybe an observation or comment, I think the bike path being wider is meant to help accommodate the bicycles, and I think that's already been mentioned, where people are taking more of an actual active transportation route from one destination to another. Yeah, so the additional width for the bike paths makes sense. Again, I think it makes sense to kind of have it on the north side. I think the south side is very good observation that you've got more people accessing the park. That's more foot traffic, hopefully, and probably less bicycles, or at least less through traffic. I think it makes sense to have, like we have in most areas of town, we have a bike path on one side, we have sidewalks on the other. As part of our sidewalk work, I'll mention for this year, we are looking at extending that sidewalk from 53rd over to 55th along University Avenue. So we'll have, if everything goes through the way the staff has it recognized, we would have a bike path on the north side of University Avenue, and we also have a continuous sidewalk on the south side of University Avenue, at least over basically to the park. We are cut off to the east due to the interstate, so we only have the one up and over there.
I think that's great. I think it's awesome that we're going to add to that. I guess the big thing for me is just living in this area, I don't see the bike traffic. And maybe it's one of those notions that if you build it, they will come. But maybe not. So I guess that's my big concern is we're taking away property, or not taking away, we're making less property in people's front yards for the sidewalk. We're cutting down trees, and like I just said, I personally think it's better suited for that south side of the road where there's significantly more pedestrian traffic or bike traffic or whatever kind of traffic you might have in that area. Yeah, I guess I would just also say is people cross the street all the time. I think that obviously my concern too is with children crossing the street. There is quite a few that cross that street to get to the park. I see it all the time in the summer, fall, and spring, and even some in the winter with the ice skating there. But I do think it'd be more utilized on that south side. And 2 out of the 4 neighbors didn't want it. I believe 1 didn't care either way, and I don't think 1 responded. So it's tough when it only affects 4 people, but I'm ready to vote if everybody else is. I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time.
I just had one question, maybe for staff. What actually pushed you towards one side or the other for this project in your recommendation?
Thank you, Vice President Mock, members of City Council. I think the long-range transportation plan does show that would be basically the continuation of the bike path along the north side. It just shows that as a gap right now. We have bike path to the east, bike path to the west, and so we're basically following the long-range transportation plan approval.
That was kind of the decision making?
Yep.
Okay. Any further comments? Any motions?
Well, I'll make the motion to follow the staff recommendation. I understand the sensitivity here, Mr. Weigel, but I think if you look at the longevity and the continuation is to follow the engineering recommendation and keep it on the north side of University Avenue.
I'll second the motion, but recognizing that this is Mr. Weigel's ward and the discussion that's been held so far, and recognizing that this is just a recommendation for next week. I'll second it, but I plan on voting against the motion.
Okay. There's a motion and a second, and yes, this is just a recommendation towards next week, and thank you, Mr. Weigel, for bringing up several of those issues. All right, motion to approve the staff recommendation, correct, Mr. Veen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so Weber and Weigel dissent, and it's a recommendation, so can we carry that forward? No, Mr. Gaston?
No, the vote fails because it's a 2-2 vote.
So then that would just be recommended that we not approve it next week at council. So it would still be on the agenda. Okay, great. Item 212, engineering agreement for project number 8338, North 42nd Street Railroad Grade Separation Crossing Environmental Document. Good evening.
All right, thank you. Back again. As you recall, 42nd Street grade separated crossing was our top priority when we talked about the legislative priorities for this year, with an attempt to have the state of North Dakota help fund the majority, hopefully the vast majority of a project like that. When we put together our timetable for potential construction, we were identifying that trying to get funding in this upcoming biennium. In order to meet that kind of a schedule, though, we can't wait until the state goes through all their finalizations of their budgets and things. That'll take until May. So in order to keep a aggressive schedule going on this thing, we would have to front end essentially the environmental document. This project was completed up through the environmental document. I think it ended in 2012, and then it kind of sat on the shelf because it was we didn't have the funding sources for it. This will reinitialize the environmental review, and basically one of the things that we have to do as a city is pick an alternative. In the staff report, we are showing the two alternatives that are still being carried. We didn't make a choice at the time because we didn't have the dollar amount, but I think if we're going to get into actual construction drawings and land acquisition, we'll need to choose essentially between the sunken intersection alternative, where the alignments stay about where they're at, and the other alternative would be the westerly alignment, in which we have a shift. The original, there was some talk in between time about having that shift instead of to the west, having it to the east, which could have happened had the golf course turned into private property. In the meantime, it's stayed a golf course, which makes it 4F, puts it in a special category with the federal highway, and I think that the state would probably recognize some of those same limitations with state money. So basically, we're still down to the two alternatives that we last left on the table. And this engineering agreement with KLJ for $278,888 will update the environmental, update cost estimates, and give us some early engineering layouts.
As part of that, would there be some public input to make sure the public understands what that change would be to the intersection?
Yes, that's part of that environmental review, is going to be out and have the public information. They're going to solicit various agencies for comments to make sure that there's nothing missed. It's essentially going to follow pretty much, it'll follow the same process we would use as if we were using federal dollars. So it's pretty heavily involved with public and agency input.
Are there additional council comments?
Yeah, I have a couple quick ones. Mr. Grasser, yourself, myself, and Ms. Mock are on the MPO, and we had a brief discussion about this in here. And I think can you just review the funding scenarios and the having, I guess, available funds or projected funds for the construction of this and what the costs might be?
Well, I'll try to give you some scenario on that. It's a tough question and comment. When you do the long-range transportation plan, that document has to be financially constrained. At least these portions of that document need to be financially constrained, which means they project out the future incomes, and the projects that are being proposed in that document need to fit within, potential financing. We always run into trouble when we do that long-range transportation plan because these large projects, of which the three that we identified as part of our current and future legislative requests, the three are the grade separated crossing on 42nd, the interchange on 47th Avenue South, and the intercity bridge. All of those end up being illustrative projects generally in the long-range transportation plan because they can't meet financial constraints. And that's been the hang-up on those projects. The city council, I think, in identifying the desire and priority to go to the legislature and get money is to try to get outside of those financial constraints through the utilization of state dollars instead of federal dollars. Again, how many dollars and things we really don't know yet. I'm sure we're going to push for as much state aid as we can. The current estimated cost that we've tried to adjust the last cost that we had due to inflation, and we're showing a 2022 estimated cost at about $45 million. That would be all in. That would be the design, the land acquisition, utility relocates, and the actual construction of the facility itself.
Okay, I'm ready to make a motion. I think we've made the decision that this was the project we were going to put on our list, and that we need to do this work probably as soon as possible to be able to make sure that we get on the list to get state funding. So I would move approval of the contract request.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there further comments or questions?
Make one quick comment,
Yes,
Ms.
Mr.
Mock.
Weigel.
Back when we were talking about another bridge over to East Grand Forks, I said multiple times that the only people that'd be happy with the bridge in their backyard were the residents of Ward 1, due to the fact that they're impacted by the trains nearly daily, I would bet. I think this is a great project. It's a great step in the right direction, and I'm excited that we can take the next step in hopefully getting this accomplished for the citizens of Grand Forks.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.13, English Coulee. Thank you, Mr. Gasser. English Coulee Renewal Master Plan Phase 1 Water Quality and Channel Improvement Analysis Project 8337. Good evening.
Good evening, Vice President Mock, members of the City Council. Tonight we're bringing before you a project with the English Coulee. We've called it Renewal Master Plan Phase 1. As you've just noted, last fall we talked a little bit about what we could do with the English Coulee and had discussions with a team at Advanced Engineering. Sean Gaddy's here tonight, and we do have a short presentation that we can provide you. It is online, although with the time that it is this evening, I'd be happy to just explain that we've looked at gathering more data, water quality data. There's some information out there, but we want to be able to gather more data on the water quality as well as the hydraulic analysis of what potentially we could do if we were able to make some improvements throughout our community to this asset. So in talking with Advanced Engineering, we've got a task order of $153,000 to look at all of that data and then be able to put together that information to look at what we would need to do with Phase 2 or Phase 3 of the project, which would be gathering more public input, bringing in more stakeholders, looking at opportunities to make improvements to that asset in our community. Because of the COVID restrictions last year during budget processing, we would need to do a budget amendment to support this project as well from our Stormwater Enterprise Fund. So I'm asking for the approval of the task order tonight so we could get started on the information and that budget amendment as well. And if we'd like to go through some more of the details on what's all included, Sean's here and is able to do that this evening.
Thank you. Council, are there comments, questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. Actually, you know, the English Coulee goes through quite a bit of my ward, probably Danny Weigel's ward too. What is the boundary of with a study? From where does it start and stop if you're going the direction the water flows?
Vice President Mock, Councilmember Vian, the boundary of the study, in essence, there isn't one in terms of the reaches that we'll be looking at for the total hydraulics and hydrologic and water quality analysis. In essence, we want to look at the coulee in its totality, including the agricultural reaches and the urban reaches into the community, and really understand, as we look at operations of the flood protection system, as we look at runoff influences that are impacting quality, as we look at the channel itself and its current geometry, where are all those opportunities for improvement? As Ms. Parvey alluded to in her comments, this first step I would call more of a technical, data-driven lift on what are those potential options. When it comes to looking at wards or reaches of the coulee, what we're currently proposing is in a second future phase, we would break down those reaches as we look at what opportunities there are in each of the reaches in order to work with stakeholders in those neighborhoods / institutional areas to really identify if we could do this, what would you want us to do? And that, like I said, is a second phase.
But based on that, you would likely be looking at the whole extent of the English coulee.
So Mr. Getty, that would say at 11th Avenue South behind Altru, there's a Y in the coulee. You know, the main stem goes through there, plus there's the one that comes from Columbia Mall. You do both of those as part of the study?
Correct.
Okay. With that, I'd move approval with the amendment.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 214, COVID-19 update.
Good evening once again, Madam Vice President of the City Council and City Council members. This is Debbie Swanson from Grand Forks Public Health Department. On your agenda, you will find a link with the usual report that Michael Dulitz does with the health officer's dashboard, and he's also included a SWOT analysis of some of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Clearly, vaccination is on everyone's mind right now as our vaccination efforts are beginning or have been beginning for a few weeks now in Grand Forks. And Grand Forks Public Health Department is finishing up first responders and healthcare workers in Phase 1A, and we anticipate being able to move to Phase 1B very soon. Phase 1B will start with those individuals that are 75 years of age and older. We've been working with all of our community partners. We have great trusting relationships among all of the providers that are receiving vaccine. For administration in Grand Forks County, we did hear of some minor adjustments that the State Health Department will be making in terms of allocations that will come to each county in North Dakota, and so we may be making some future adjustments and collaborations to make sure that we get vaccinations into arms as quickly as possible. We absolutely want no wasted doses. We want everyone to be vaccinated when the opportunity arises for them to do so. We're really excited that there's such strong interest, but because there's strong interest, there aren't enough doses for when everyone wants to be vaccinated. So we are asking the public's patience as we work through some of the complexities of getting this vaccine out. We also know that there may be a change in vaccine rollout from the federal government with a change in administration. So we're watching that very carefully as well. We've held a number of clinics at the Alaris Center. They've been very smooth. We're really pleased with the facility. We really like conducting clinics there. We know that as we move into other phases and other tiers, we'll employ a number of ways to reach the public in in a variety of ways, I should just say. But right now, we expect some mass vaccination clinics while the supplies are what they are right now. And if we should get larger supplies, we would expand those clinics to include more partners and have more vaccine doses available at them. I think that's the majority of my report for right now, but I certainly will answer any questions. If you have questions specific to the health officer's dashboard and the data, I can try to answer those, but I can also offer up Michael Dulitz as a really great resource for diving into any data-related questions as well. So I'll be happy to entertain any questions from council members at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Any questions from the council?
I've got a quick question for Ms.
Yes.
Swanson.
Mr. Weigel.
Ms. Swanson, I may have missed this. I apologize. I had a phone call come in. But what has been the temperature from people with the vaccines? Have people been excited to get it? Have people been interested in getting it? Can you just kind of touch on that briefly, and that'll kind of lead into my second question?
Certainly, Councilmember Weigel and members of the City Council, we're seeing really strong interest here in Grand Forks. At Valley Senior Living, Garth Ridland reported that more than 90% of residents in their long-term care facilities decided to take the vaccine, and a strong number of their staff did as well. We recognize that it was available to a lot of individuals during the holiday week, and some people were waiting to see how first doses went and wanted to get through the holidays, so they may be looking for opportunities to get their vaccine now. Among the public, the interest is very strong. We are getting a large number of requests at the health department. We're also hearing reports that All True Health System is receiving a lot of phone calls as well, and we're working through ways that we can respond to those. But our message is to watch for the news media, and when we are moving between phases, we will inform everybody and give them opportunities to become vaccinated as soon as vaccine for that individual is available. And then I'd be happy to answer your other question.
Perfect. So, like I said, that kind of leads into my second question. I've seen on some of the news media where there are certain states that their rollout or delivery of the vaccination maybe has been a little less than what they expected or a little less than stellar. Is there opportunities to redistribute those vaccines to a city or county like Grand Forks where there's been strong interest to keep us rolling in the right direction so that we get more vaccines so that there isn't an issue with availability?
Councilmember Weigel and members of the City Council, I'll do my best to explain that, but please keep in mind this is a very evolving situation. We've seen both ends of the spectrum in other parts of the country where there is rapid rollout and people are standing in long lines and they're waiting for a dose and it may not be available to them. And we really want to avoid those situations where we place people at risk of their health standing in lines, and we also need to make sure that people are socially distanced throughout this entire process. So that's first and foremost, our goal is to have an efficient process, but one that is a very safe process at the same time. We also know that there may be lower than anticipated uptake in some areas of the country. I have not heard that they are reallocating doses between states. Our state knows what its allocations will be for the next few weeks, and they are doing their absolute best to allocate that across the state in a fair and equitable way based on population estimates. And I can say with a lot of confidence that in North Dakota, we're getting vaccine administered as soon as we receive it. Grand Forks Public Health has not had any vaccine awaiting administration for more than probably 48 hours from when we receive it to when we administer it. And I think that's been the case of most of our providers here. So it is complicated though, and especially if you do not have the public health infrastructure that we have in North Dakota. I cannot venture to guess whether or not we will get additional doses based on what's happening in other parts of our state or other parts of our country. I think that is yet to be determined.
Perfect, thank you.
Any further questions for Ms. Swanson? Again, thank you so much for all your work and all the effort that goes into this planning. With that, we're at the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move adjourn.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Awesome. And we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.